Let's talk about the mysterious ex-Twitter account, DC Nightmare. He's a bit of a Nostradamus, and I've had him on my radar for quite some while, and I wanted to talk about him for a long time. But I really wanted to do a bit more research. I wanted to see a few more posts, and yesterday I saw a few more things that kind of interested me. Now, DC Nightmare has predicted a lot of interesting things about the restoration of the Snyderverse, things that are coming to pass. Suddenly, all his hints came to feel truthful because all of a sudden Snyder was on Instagram, and at first he was just posting pictures of his movie, The Last Picture. But then suddenly, Snyder started to post Snyderverse images, right? BTS footage of Superman calling Henry Cavill is Superman. Lots of Batfleck pictures. It's been very interesting. It's like we're going back to the old posts he did on the other social media platform, the name of that platform escapes me right now. But it seems like we're going back to the old release, the Snyder Cut days, isn't it? Really exciting. So anyway, back in February, Zack Snyder and James Gunn took a selfie together. And this is what James had to say. Just to remind you, always a pleasure catching up with my friend Zack Snyder, consummate filmmaker and a doubly consummate storyteller. So that's really lovely compliments because he didn't have to qualify Zack as a storyteller and a filmmaker. This is very interesting. Now, DC Nightmare back in February quote tweeted this: JL2 and 3 will film back to back once schedules are freed up. Based on its success, spin-offs will be considered and put into production. Announcements will be done to avoid confusion amongst DC storylines. All DC fans will get what they want. So this is interesting. Now this is a hint that the Gunverse, the DCU, will continue to be a thing while Zack Snyder's Snyderverse will play in the Elseworlds playground. So very interesting. Now, for me, personally, it's not just about Zack Snyder. I didn't like James Gunn's Superman. Interestingly, there is a great epic movie in James Gunn's Superman. He just didn't write it. He just didn't edit it together properly. I hate his shot choices for Superman, first and foremost. And he knew he couldn't do it. And he told Safran he couldn't do it. And to Gunn's credit, he was honest about that, and Safran pressured him into directing this movie, and he did it badly. There are some good things in Superman. I like the idea of Superman going, people were going to die. I don't care about the politics of that war. I'm here to save people's lives. I like that. I like the fact that he always believed his parents sent him to Earth to protect humanity. Then he kind of finds out that's not the real reason, and that blows his mind and changes everything for him. These are interesting story constructs that weren't executed very well. And that's why, for me, Superman wasn't a very good film. But I have enjoyed Gunn's previous works. I loved the first season of Peacemaker. I haven't seen Peacemaker season 2. I loved his Guardians movies. I loved the Suicide Squad. So it's not like I haven't appreciated his stuff before. So who is DC Nightmare? I would assume that DC Nightmare is either someone who works at the lower levels at Warner Brothers Discovery, someone who works on productions, or someone who knows Zack Snyder, who's spreading the information that Zack wants him to do because Zack can't do it himself. I think these are the scenarios of who DC Nightmare is. But it really doesn't matter who DC Nightmare is. It's clear he knows things. Now, in the early days of him posting, I was very cynical and dubious. I thought another Snyderverse fan, living off wishful thinking. You can't blame me for thinking that. I want the Snyderverse restored. I love Zack Snyder, right? But it's not just about Zack. Something has to be done about James Gunn and the direction he's going in, because I don't like it. But at the very least, if we're going to get the Snyderverse restored, at least I've got something to be excited about again. So this is very, very interesting, but it's all conjecture at this point. We don't know who DC Knightmare is, if in fact he is giving us accurate information. But to be fair to DC Knightmare, a lot of the stuff he has said already has come to pass. Now, when I look at James Gunn from the very beginning of his tenure as co-CEO of DC Studios, at the very least, he was very, very honest. He spoke about a splintered DC universe. He even spoke about how fans are divided. You have Snyderverse stands, you have Arrowverse stands. Neither of these fandoms are very happy because both these franchises for DC were imploded by WB. I believe Arrowverse had a longer life than it had, and the Snyderverse had a much more longer life than it did. What they did to Zack Snyder was utterly wrong. But anyway, I've been holding something under my hat for a very, very long time. I was told a long time ago that James Gunn had a secret plan to restore the Snyderverse, but it was going to be something that was going to have to take time. So the idea was ultimately to bring the Snyderverse back, to restore the Snyderverse within DC Elseworlds. But it's a complicated issue. James Gunn has his own Superman. If you bring back Cavill's Superman within a DC Elseworld, doesn't that dilute what James Gunn's doing? Now, personally, I think it does. Now, I don't give a shit about that because I'll be all in the Snyderverse. But it's all very, very interesting how this works, because at the end of the day, we've already discussed that WB and Zaslav don't want two Batmen. There doesn't seem to be any development on Brave and the Bold. We don't have a DCU Batman. It's all a bit of a mess, if you ask me. So like the Reeveverse has created this issue for James Gunn, doesn't restoring the Snyderverse bring in its own problems as well? I want it restored. But here's the thing, and in a way, it's a bit like Snyderverse stands have hijacked DC and given them a problem. I don't believe until you restore the Snyderverse, until you finish Zack's arc, that we can move forward. Because the Snyderverse community are a very sophisticated community, and they're going to keep on poisoning everything else that's not Snyder. Now, ultimately, if James Gunn came in and made a great Superman movie and did a good job with Peacemaker 2 and didn't finish it the way that he did, there won't be a problem. The Snyderverse stands' voices would have been silenced. What Gunn did by making a terrible Superman movie that's got good stuff within it that could have been great, if he actually did a great Superman movie, then no one would give a shit what Snyderverse stands are saying. And it's not like the Gunn stands are any better, defending something that's utterly fucking terrible. Lying about box office, trying to conflate and stat pad an absolutely stupid, embarrassing look. We all know Superman didn't make any money. We know 615 million is a lot of money, but it wasn't enough for a movie that cost as much as it did. We're now hearing rumours that the budget cost as much as the film's production budget. I don't know if that's true, but I was told a very long time ago that James Gunn, like myself, understands unless Zack is allowed to finish what he started, these fans are not going to leave him alone. They're going to keep on verbally battering him and battering him again. It's never going to end, but it's now or never for the restoration of the Snyderverse. Because Henry Cavill, Ben Affleck, Gal Gadot and Ray Fisher ain't getting any fucking younger. I mean, Ray Fisher's a young guy at the very least. And I'm not saying that Affleck and Cavill are really old and can't play Batman and Superman. But, you know, there's going to come a time where that's going to be impossible and it will look fucking stupid. So it's now or never for restoring the Snyderverse. It's what I want. It's what most of you subscribe to this channel want. I believe that Gunn understands this. But there's a question mark right now over Gunn's future. Here's the reality. So is the plan to restore the Snyderverse with the new owners of Warner Brothers Discovery? Let me be clear to you. The people who are going to own Warner Brothers Discovery already know they're going to own it. That agreement has been made. I'm not going to sit here and tell you who is going to buy Warner Brothers Discovery. I know who's going to own Warner Brothers Discovery. I know whether it's going to be a full sale or not, or a merger. I have this information, but I can't release it at this point because this will give me serious legal ramifications. I may have a bit of money, but I don't have enough money to deal being sued by huge corporate entities. So yes, I do know the future of Warner Brothers Discovery and who's going to partner or actually own it as a whole. And we'll get into that when that news is revealed. By the way, you won't have to wait too much longer to find out who's going to own or share the ownership of Warner Brothers Discovery. So they already know who they are. They know what they're planning for DC, right? They know. And they know whether they're going to keep James Gunn or not. So the fact that James Gunn's future is up in the air is very interesting. How does this new company feel about Zack Snyder and the Snyderverse? Like me and James Gunn, they understand one thing. They know this fandom. They know this fandom's never going to give up. They know they have to restore the Snyderverse. I agree with DC Nightmare. The Snyderverse is going to be restored. And it's going to be restored very, very quickly. Zack Snyder already knows this and is in communications with the brand new owners or the people who share ownership, whoever they are. I'm not going to say anything more than that. Snyder is in talks with the new company involved with Warner Brothers Discovery. They want him to restore the Snyderverse. And DC Nightmare is correct. We're all going to get what we want. But the future of James Gunn isn't so clear. So what's going to happen? The DCU now feels like a defunct franchise. Nobody's talking about Superman apart from the Snyder and Gunn stands when they're arguing with each other. And that's not a positive thing because I know I say sometimes, or we all say, all publicity is good publicity, but nobody cares about Superman. It's as simple as that. You can conflict and stat pad. It's, you know, box office and it's digital sales and physical media. They're going to stat pad the sales of the physical media as well. But it doesn't matter. The whole thing's a fucking failure. Nobody cares about it. That's the problem. So James Gunn's future is up in the air. This doesn't mean he's definitely going to be fired. I think, in a way, the DCU is dead, but I think it will be reconfigured in a different way. What do I mean by this? Well, I've made this hint for a very long time. I think the new company involved with Warner Brothers Discovery will let James Gunn work in his own DC corner. He will allow him to take his Superman, his Suicide Squad universe, his Peacemaker, all of that, and work in his little corner. But it won't be part of the central universe because from what I'm hearing, this new company doesn't want to set up some connected franchise. So James Gunn can still have Corn Sweat and all of that, but he's going to be in his little corner. But the DCU won't be the central connected universe for DC. That's what I'm hearing. And this is the best way forward, everyone, for DC. This is what Gunn and Safran and Zaslav should have done from the very beginning. Give talented filmmakers and creatives their different little corners and places and spots at the DC Universe. Then they can thrive, we can thrive, and finally, Warner Brothers and DC can also thrive.